Welcome to Creekside Online. Our mission is to reach the world with Jesus one person at a time, with Christ, community, and compassion. We are so glad that you are joining us today. If it is your very first time, please take a moment to click the link below and fill out an online Connect card. We would love for you to stay connected throughout the week and everywhere you go. And the best way to do that is through our church app. There you can watch additional messages and find resources to help you grow in your relationship with Christ. It's free and you can download it wherever you download your apps. For us, church is so much more than just a weekend experience. And we want you to know that there's a place here for you at Creekside. No matter where you're watching today, let's get ready for what God has in store for us.
You guys, that's on me. Good morning. My name is Eli Birchfield, and I am the student minister here, and I am so grateful that I get to speak to you today. It's a special day. It's New Year's Eve, which is awesome because I get to be the person that checks in on your 2023 New Year's resolutions. And so if you have not completed whatever your resolution was for 2023 when you set it, listen, you have about 14 hours left. It's awesome weather for it, unless it's, unless you need to be a warm day, then I'm sorry. But if not, it's a great time to finish this out. I believe in you. Yeah, okay, cool. No one's like, yeah, I'm going to tackle it. No one's like, I'm going to go right now. It's fine. But last week was Christmas Eve, and it was an awesome, awesome service. And during it, Chuck brought forward this idea that God is for our peace. And I get to present the idea today that Jesus is also for your future. And to some of you, these might feel like oppositional ideas. You don't use the word future and peace unless there's the word without in the middle. See, the idea of, or the word even of the future might seem dark and bleak and hopeless. And that's just being a Florida State fan. Not even real issues, On a serious note, if you know a Florida State fan, please reach out to them today. But this is a real struggle for adults and for students. Again, I'm a student minister, and so I have students who are asking me questions. They're asking their small group leaders questions, and they're really tough questions about the future. And really what they're trying to see is if God is going to provide for them, if He cares for them. These students, like many in this room, I would assume, don't feel like their futures are secured. And 2024 is looming. It feels like a really big year. I don't really know why. I mean, for me, I have a baby on the way, which is awesome and exciting, but terrifying. Yeah, woo. Got till March. But it's just 2024 just feels massive. Maybe it's a leap year. I don't know what it is. But as I'm looking at what's going on in the world and I take inventory, I kind of get nervous. And so we're going to be talking today just about what does it mean for God to be for our future. When I was in high school, I ran cross country because I'm tall and skinny, and my coach was like, that's what you need. And so I ran cross country, and I was pretty competitive. I was pretty good at it. And so I was able to keep up with some of the other schools' better runners. And there was one school in particular that they had their coach who ran with them the entire race and just ran beside them. And he had a slogan. And so it was this: there ain't no struggle like a slow struggle. But he's like a barely guy. So it was like, there ain't no struggle like a slow struggle, on repeat, whole time, whole race. And sometimes it was like a jump scare because we'd follow his runner and then he'd pop out later and then he'd come back in the woods later and he's throwing hands at this guy who's random, hey, no struggle. And it's okay, I got it, I know it. And so I know the sentiment. I know it really well, right? It's slowing down doesn't make it better. It just makes it longer, right? And this guy really was my nightmare. Not because he jump scared me during cross country, but really because the only other 7 words he knew were, ain't no struggle like a slow struggle. But he would insert numbers randomly of, hey, you have 2 miles left, Or, hey, you're at a 5-minute something pace. Or whatever it is. Like, he's just telling you all the time. Like, hey, here's where you're at. Here's what you're doing. And I cannot stand knowing those things. Like, when we do cross-country practices, you have to run 50 miles, whatever it is. Like, I don't want to know that. I just want to know I'm running until you tell me to stop. When I drive through I-95, you pass, like, the Buc-ee's is 258 miles away signs, and that's, like, my nightmare. I don't want to know. Thank you, Mr. Bucky Beaver. I guess it's the mascot. I, like, turn off Google Maps. Some people love that, though. That's them. They're like, 391, 390, let's go. 389, even better. Like, those, like, little small increments really change the game for them. And it's not who I am. I don't want to know. But the thing is that most people desire instant gratification. And those small little changes in the number, that's enough for them. The slow struggle is avoided at all cost. But in life and in planning for our futures, it's important that we understand that even though we desire instant gratification, God's plans don't always satisfy that desire. And you might ask, if God's future does not give me immediate benefit, then what does it mean for God to be for a future? If it doesn't guarantee me that tomorrow is going to be immediately better, then what does it mean that God's for it? Because my immediate's pretty pressing to me. The things that I have to do today, tomorrow, this upcoming week, they feel really pressing to me. So if it's not guaranteeing that these all things are going to work out, then what does that mean? Does it mean that everything down the road is going to work out? That maybe like, hey, like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's all going to be perfect and everything's going to completely make sense and I'm going to understand it all? Or maybe does it mean that if God's for my future, then it's out of my hands. It's His responsibility. I don't have to do anymore. I'm no longer an active participant in my future. God's got it, and I don't have to worry in any way or act in any way. And some of you might feel, when you hear that God does not immediately solve all of the issues, there isn't guarantee that He's going to solve all the issues, then is He even for my future at all? I want to bring forward some of these questions that you might be asking, and I want to work through them. And the first question I want to look at is one that you don't even know you're asking. But if God is for my future, does that mean that my life is going to be easy? And the simple answer is to look at someone who is in the Bible, who's clear, they followed Jesus, and see what happened. And the person we're going to look at today is Paul. Paul is a Christian who began as a Jewish religious leader, and not just a Jewish religious leader, he was someone who persecuted Christians. The first time we are introduced to him, he's holding the jackets of other Jewish people to go and stone a Christian to death. So they have their throwing arm is free, so they can throw better. That's the first time we see him. And so then he encounters Jesus face to face, and he turns his life completely around. He goes around from church to church, becomes a missionary, proclaiming the gospel. He's one of the most influential early church Christians. He also wrote nearly 50% of the New Testament. And so clearly this is an awesome case study, right? Because he was awful, this terrible dude killing Christians, and then he became a Christian and was like completely sold out. So obviously his life had to get better, right? But for Paul, that's not the case. Paul is shipwrecked twice. He's beaten for his faith. In every city he goes to, almost every city he goes to, he's arrested for proclaiming the gospel. Even sometimes the church fails him. He writes a letter and says, listen, the people who I thought I could trust and rely on, they have abandoned me. Paul gets it in the worst ways. He knows that it's not going to be immediately easier. And so Paul writes a letter to Rome, and he's sending it out kind of ahead of himself, saying, listen, I want to be in Rome. I want to come see you guys, but just in case I don't make it, just in case something along my journey stops me, I want to make sure that you have all the things you need. And so he writes out this incredibly long letter that has all of his theology and all these major points in it. In Romans chapter 8, he says this, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Jesus is not an escape pod from problems. Jesus suffered. When he came to earth, he suffered. Not because he wanted to, but because it's a part of the human experience. Paul also wrote in another one of his letters, for this light, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. It's a small affliction when compared to the big mercy that God is offering. And so hear me on this. Just because something is hard doesn't mean that God's not in it. One more time. Just because something is hard, it's difficult, does not mean that God's not in it. And this is why I think it's a question that we don't even know we ask. Because when things get hard, we assume that God clearly can't be behind this. If this is difficult, then God is clearly telling me, no, this is a door shut, can't be possible. No way. God would never lead me there. It's like when we come out of the baptismal, we've been baptized, we say yes to Jesus, then we're expecting God to put a bubble around us and say, you're perfect and safe, and don't worry about it, you're all good, and anything that comes near you, just run away from it. And that's not the case. And I personally do this all the time still. I have conversations with students, and I'll do the things I think I'm supposed to do. I hit all the right points, the conversation goes where I hope it goes, and at the end of it, I'm like, man, it's going to be great, and then God doesn't show up in the way that I think he's supposed to. Maybe the conversation just kind of falls flat, or maybe they kind of still has hesitations, or whatever it is. Like, there's a moment I'm like, oh man, God, like, why didn't you show up here? I did all the right things. And then maybe a week later, maybe the next time I see that student, maybe way down the road, a student comes forward and they say, I still have more questions about Jesus, I want to talk about him. Or maybe it's, hey, I actually want to follow Jesus and I want to be baptized. And it's awesome. And those moments are great, but they also hit me like a ton of bricks because I realize that God doesn't waste an experience, but we can. One more time, God doesn't waste an experience, but we can. And I'm not saying that God's like cheering on bad experiences and he's throwing down tragedies just to do good things with them. That's not at all the case. But God's plan is still going to happen in spite of the bad. In spite of the evil, in spite of the selfishness, the greed, the corruption, me inserting my own selfish desires and will, God's plan is still going to come to fruition. And so the question, if God's for our futures, does that mean that life is going to be easy? The answer is no, but God can use the hard times for a better future. Just this past week or so, I had a student reach out to me in a text, and they asked me the question, what does it mean to be content in God? Which, as a side note here, that's an awesome question, and I love that we have students asking these incredibly hard questions, and these questions are big, and they're like questions you don't usually get from a student. But it shows how desperate they are for Jesus. And I'm not worried about this student, but I want you to think, if you have a child, do you know their questions about God? Because I answer a lot of them, the small groups leaders answer a lot of questions about God, and if you don't know your own students' questions about God, then you need to start asking them. Hey, what are you wondering right now? Do you know what you know about God? Like, where are you at in this? Be engaged in it. And this is like a shameless plug for student ministry here. These students are asking really tough questions. They are so desperate to know Jesus, to feel like their futures are secured. And if you have any deep care and you feel like, man, that's something maybe I want to engage in, that's something I want to step into, I would love to plug you in and connect you to students who want to know Jesus and be in community. And not just community with the people who are the same age, but people who are able to pour into them, who have more life and advice and wisdom and also scriptural knowledge. And also, they just need someone to give them a high five. So if that's you, you can do that too. Awesome. But in answering the student's question, I said this to them. Being content in God is a total surrender of yourself. The reason we aren't content in God is usually because we have a desire, a plan, or an expectation that we believe we deserve and God should deliver. Being content in God, and for the purposes of today, being content in God's plan for our future is resting in who he is, not what's happening to us. And so the second question I want to look at is, if God is for a future, does that mean that tomorrow is assured? Does that mean that my plans are assured? So before I moved here, I lived in North Carolina, and I was part of a group of youth ministers that met regularly. We read books, we talked about our ministries, we did a bunch of stuff together. It was awesome. And going into the new year, one of these times, it was December time, and one of them comes up to me and goes, hey, do you have a new campaign or slogan for your ministry, for your church? And he was really excited about it. And I was like, no, we don't really do that. That's not what we have. We don't have one for this year. And you have to do the whole now what about you? Because he's obviously so excited to share it. He started popping. He's like, yeah, man, I'm going to change everything. Youth ministry is going to be totally different. It's going to be radical, crazy, and even our big service is going to be awesome and different. And I was like, okay, what's the slogan? And he goes, it's 2020 vision, looking ahead. And let me tell you, he did change the way he did youth ministry that year. 100%. 2020 was a great year for changing youth ministries. He went to Zoom. That was awesome. Crazy, new idea. And it was he had this idea of what 2020 was going to be, and it was all going to work out and be so perfect. He was so excited for what was going to happen. And it shows that even like as ministers, people who, we're in this every day, like working on it, like we can still get caught in those moments of, man, God surely has to promise me this good thing then, right? Like I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing this good thing, so clearly God's got to promise me it's going to work out. Or maybe he doesn't have to promise me, but I'm gonna believe that he's going to work it out because I deserve it because it's a good idea. Paul writes in Romans, for to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. Those who are in the flesh cannot please God. And this idea of the flesh is really just things of the world. Paul uses it sometimes as an imagery tool for things that we insert above God. It's this rivalry between the things we want to put above God and God himself. But Paul is talking about this idea, and in it he says, the flesh is something that is really hard to overcome. Because we set our heart on it. We set everything that we are on this idea, the thing that we think we can control, the things of this earth that we think we have the right over and control over. And we're pushing God out and we're inserting ourselves into it. And what we're really doing is not trusting that God is good, but God's going to give us what we want because of how good we are. It's not that God's good, it's that I'm good enough for God to give me what I need, what I want. Not what I need, what I want, what I desire. We insert ourselves. But we don't have control. So for the question, does God being for our future mean that tomorrow is assured, that our plans are assured? The answer is no, we don't have control, and we need to be ready. And being ready looks like this parable that Jesus shares in Luke chapter 12. It says, stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning, and be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast, so they may open the door for him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are the servants whose master finds him awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at the table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or in the third and finds them awake, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief was coming, he would have not left his house to be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. We need to be awake. And being awake isn't just being busy, it's being prepared, it's being ready. A full schedule, even if it's full of all really great things, if we're working really hard and we're planning and we're doing all these awesome things, if we're not relinquishing control of ourselves and letting God take control, it's in vain. It's a wasted calendar. We have to let God direct us. Being awake and being ready is knowing what the sound of the knock will sound like, Being busy but not being ready can look like this. When I was in college, my wife and I were dating, and I wanted to take her on a date, and I promised her a winter wonderland of lights. I was sure of it. It was going to be awesome. My wife loves Christmas lights. We love going out and looking at them. And so I promised her this. I was like, awesome, I can totally deliver on this. Except the problem is, we got back from winter break on January 7th. And so most winter wonderlands are in boxes at this point. And so I'm like hunting. I am searching everywhere I can. I'm looking around. I went to like the 6th page of Google results, which after like page 1's an abyss. Like if you go past page 1 in Google, you know you're desperate. 6 pages is a losing battle, and I found it. And so eventually I put the right combinations of words into Google, and I find this forum that's talking about these houses that are awesome, and they're really well decorated, and there's photos, and they look awesome. Sweet. And they say they run until the 10th, which is perfect, because I only need today. And so I made this really big deal to my wife about it. I'm like, I promised this winter wonderland of lights. We go and we get like hot chocolate before. I'm like blasting Mariah Carey Christmas the whole way through. I'm really trying to make this thing the most awesome date possible. And we pull up to where Google Maps says we're supposed to be, and it's an apartment complex. And there's like 2 apartments that have lights, and they're like wimpy. It's bad. Because all the UT kids aren't even back yet. So it was like an abandoned apartment complex. It was bad. It was bad. And my wife's a really good sport. She laughed about it, and she still laughs about it. And we drove around Knoxville on the way back to college, on the way back to our campus. We were driving through, and any single neighborhood that I saw had like a single house with lights. I pulled in. I was like, that's going to be a redemption. It's going to be great. None of them were. It was really sad the whole way through. But we spent a lot of time just going through these neighborhoods and spending time talking, and again, my wife laughing at me a lot for it. And all this effort that I put into this date, all the scrambling, all the prep work, it didn't matter. It was the time we spent in each other's company. Really, I had made myself busy to impress her, but the time where I was present was way more important. How often are you present at church? How often are you present in your spouse's faith walk? How present are you in your child's faith? Are you busy prepping and scheming and working on things that we don't even have control over? Because we make promises and plans without even considering that God's in control. You go, surely this has to work out. Chuck has talked a bit about how Jesus, when he says he's an advisor, he's a counselor, it means more than just a therapist. It means he's an advisor for war. It's this piece where it's not just that he's here to hear your feelings, he's here to help direct you to take on a battle. What would it look like if you're 2024 if you asked for directions before every step that you took? If we remove the assumption that I have any control, and before I take any step, before I lead my family in any direction, I'm going to make sure that God's calling me in that direction. Are you living like tomorrow is assured? Are you spending the days that you're given being ready to know when God knocks? It's a tough question. And the last question I want to look at is, if God's for our future, does that mean that I don't have a job to do? Or maybe another way you'll ask this is, once I start following Jesus, does that mean I've reached my purpose? When someone is being baptized, we say this thing where it's the best decision that you'll ever make. And it truly is the best decision you will ever make. Following Jesus, putting him as Lord of your life, is the best decision, but it is not the last one. And sometimes it can feel like we've crossed the finish line. Yeah, my eternity is set. I'm all good. I'm going to be with Jesus. Awesome. You don't have to worry about it. But really, what's happening is you were on a circular track, and you were just kind of ending at the same point, and you're just exhausted, and you're not really going anywhere. And saying yes to Jesus is stepping onto a marathon trail. It's saying, I want a new direction, a new end goal, a new point to look towards, a new purpose. And God has a great purpose for your life. Paul puts it this way in Romans, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is in the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Paul wrote a letter to a church in Thessalonica, and in it, he's wrapping up his last letter, his second letter, and he addresses this group. And basically, when he had come and he visited, there's people who understood it, they got it. Jesus is for them, and he's coming back. And they understood that as, well, if Jesus is coming back, then I don't have to really worry about it. I can just chill until God comes and picks me up. And so they quit their jobs. They're relying on the church to take care of them. They're not doing anything except kind of just lounging around, just waiting for Jesus' return. And Paul says, look, listen, I wasn't being idle. I wasn't sitting around doing nothing when I came and shared the gospel to you. Likewise, you should go and do the same. In verse 13, he says, as for you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. You have a purpose. More than just being baptized and following Jesus, we are called to go out and share the gospel in the light with the world around us. Does God being for our future mean that we don't have a job to do anymore? The answer is no. God has given us a mission to know him, to grow in community, and to go with compassion. And if you feel like you don't have a direction or a purpose going into 2024, and you feel a little bit aimless, maybe it's as simple as making Creekside's mission yours. You don't have to come up with one. The creativity's there. We've already done it. You can just adopt ours. And our mission is that we will reach the world with Jesus, one person at a time, by creating biblical disciples in relational environments. Maybe those biblical disciples are your neighbors. The relational environment is your house. Maybe it's in a small group here at church. Wherever it is, maybe you just make this your mission. And our how do we do this? How do we make that mission possible? It's through the giant sign in the lobby. You can't miss it. It's through knowing Christ, growing in community, and going out with compassion. These are steps that we as a staff still do. It's not like there's any point in our lives where we're like, oh, I'm good. I've done it all. I've checked all 3 boxes. That's it. It's a cycle of continually knowing Christ more, growing in community, and continually going out into our communities and reaching people for Jesus. But maybe you're on the other end of the scale. You already have a purpose. You already know what Jesus has called you to do, and maybe you're doing it really well. But 2023 was a really hard year. Maybe you had losses. Maybe there's defeats along the way. There's people who you thought were going to come to Jesus who didn't. Whatever it is, 2023 for you and your mission were really tough. If that's you, first, I want you to hear this. Good job and keep it up. That's awesome. A tired 2023 at the end of 2023 for Jesus is a great reason to be tired. But like Paul says, don't grow weary. Don't let 2024 be a rest year. Don't get caught sleeping. Be awake. Be ready. And I don't want to seem like I'm driving this idea that works are the most important thing. That that God just wants you to do, and that's how you earn God's love. And maybe these answers are different if you do enough. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But what I'm trying to say is that you have been given a mission. You have been given a great purpose. And so if you said yes, let 2024 be a year where you attack it. Where you say, I'm going to go even harder and go even more at this goal of reaching people for Jesus, and I'm going to see what God can do. And see where it lands you. It'd be an incredible, incredible place to land. And so, what does it mean for God to be for our future? So far, I've really only confirmed 3 negatives. I haven't really said anything that positive about it. But what does it mean for God to be for our future? God is for our future because he offers us the best one. Ephesians 2:10, this is another letter of Paul. He writes, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." God has a plan that includes you. Even the mess, even the things that we think that maybe God would reject us for, the things we don't want even God to know about, God has a plan that includes you. And like I said earlier, his plan is still going to happen in spite of whatever, but it is the best future. God is in the business of restoration and redemption. It's the plan he set in motion in Genesis that's still working now. God being for our future should give us hope and confidence to charge into 2024. If it feels bleak and hopeless and all these negative feelings kind of come to the surface when you think about the next year or the future, then you should rest not in how you feel, but who God is. Because God has a perfect plan and he wants to include you in it. So what does it look like to say yes to this plan? To start following Jesus, to put him the Lord of your life, and to rest in what he is doing. It looks like being a part of the community in this room that's unified through Jesus. It looks like engaging in his word and reading your Bible every day. It looks like serving with students and children and greeting and next steps and worship and students and serving student ministry. It looks like not worrying about how you look to your spouse or the people around you when you worship with your heart fully open to God. It looks like being a parent that is encouraging and engaging your child's faith. It looks like tithing without worrying about who's going to win in 2024. And really what it looks like is being someone who isn't worried about how good they are, but giving their all to a good and perfect God. So have you planned out your future yourself? Or have you asked God to lead you? Are you saying, I still got some things I really I don't trust to give up. I need these things to work out. I've been planning them for a really long time, and I'm not ready. Or maybe it's I've been planning to come back to Jesus after I graduate, or I've been planning to come back to Jesus after my child's certain age, or I plan to get back, all these things together. I got my plan already. Don't worry. I know when I'm going to come to Jesus. I've already planned it out myself. Instead of letting that go and saying, God, please lead me. If I need to take a step now, then let me take the step now. If I need to take a step away from something, then God, lead me away. Not that I need to run from everything that's hard, but because I need to run towards everything that is you. Where are you at going into 2024? Let's pray. God, you are so, so good. God, you love us and you care for us. You have a plan, God, that is working towards redemption and restoration. God, I pray that we say yes to it, God, that we try not to insert our own wills, our own selfish desires. God, we don't let the flesh lead us, but God, that we surrender everything. God, we trust in your victories and in your great plan. God, not our own scheming and God, our plans that we think we have control over and all these things that we think we know. God, I pray that we trust the perfect God who has a perfect plan for us. In your name, amen.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. We hope the message you just listened to had an impact on you. Make sure to stay connected with us through the week online at creeksidechristian.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Creekside Christian Church. We believe God has something unique to say to you, and our hope is that you feel His love stronger today than ever before. We love you, and we'll see you next time.